I was 3 seconds away from being executed by the Royal Mage Council for the crime of growing too much grass. Not poison grass, not magic grass, just regular grass. Apparently in this world, that was enough to get a man hanged at sunrise. The High Mage pointed his glowing staff at my chest. His voice was calm. "Peasant Aldrich, confess your dark pact, or burn?" I looked at him. Then I looked at the small patch of suspiciously green wheat growing through the courtyard stones behind him, and I honestly considered laughing in his face, because the situation I was in was so absurd that even a fantasy world had to be joking. Because 2 months ago, I was Dr. Marcus Wells, agricultural scientist, 31 years old, drinking cold coffee in a lab in Minnesota, and now I was about to die over a vegetable garden. The universe really had a sense of humor about my career path. Let me back up, about 60 days back, to be exact, to the moment I died holding a tray of fresh soil samples in my laboratory. I slipped on a wet lab floor. That is the whole heroic origin story. 6 years of research, 2 PhDs, taken out by a janitor's mop bucket. My last thought was, please tell me the cloud backup finished uploading. It did not finish, but somehow, against all logic, I did. I woke up to the smell of hay and a wooden ceiling above me. A chicken was sitting on my chest. The chicken was staring into my soul. I screamed. The chicken screamed louder and launched itself sideways into a wooden wall. I think we both lost that round equally. A woman ran into the room. Middle-aged, kind eyes, hands rough from years of farm work. She grabbed my face with surprising strength. "Aldrich, you're awake," she cried. "The fever finally broke." I stared at her because I had never seen this woman in my entire life. But somewhere in the back of my brain, a memory I did not earn whispered one quiet word at me. The word was simply, "Mother?" Great. So I was Aldrich now. Wonderful. I had inherited a body, a mother, and apparently a fever that had almost killed me yesterday. It took me about 3 hours to piece together what had happened. I was in a fantasy world. Not the cool kind with elves and good dental care. The other kind? Mud roads, no soap, taxes paid in actual potatoes. People who had never once questioned why bread sometimes glowed. The original Aldrich, the kid whose body I now lived inside, was 19 years old. The village idiot, the only son of a poor farmer. He had recently undergone something called the awakening ceremony. That was the moment every person in this world received their class. Aldrich had received exactly one skill. It was called overgrowth. That was it. Just one word. No bonus stats, no hidden upgrade tree. The full skill description floated in my own vision like a video game menu. It read, causes plants in a small area to grow 10% faster. In a world where the village blacksmith summoned fire from his hands, where the priest could heal broken bones, I got plant fertilizer. I sat on the bed and laughed for about 6 full minutes straight. My new mother thought I was having another fever spell from the illness. Look, I have to be completely honest with you. In my old life, I would have been deeply disappointed too. Probably furious, actually. But I had spent 15 years of my career studying exactly one thing. Plants, soil chemistry, crossbreeding, crop engineering science. I had walked into this fantasy world holding the answers to questions these people did not even know existed yet. Real scientific answers. And the universe had handed me a skill that made plants grow 10% faster. I felt like a race car driver handed a child's tricycle. But somewhere deep in my brain, a much quieter voice was already whispering one specific thing. It just kept saying, 10%. Remember that quiet voice, because that voice is the reason I'm currently 3 seconds away from execution in a courtyard. Well, let me explain how exactly we got here. It starts, like most disasters in human history start, with a man getting just a little too curious. The first thing I did was inspect the family farm. It was, in technical scientific terms, a complete and total disaster from top to bottom. The soil was exhausted. They had grown the same crop in the same fields for 15 years straight. No rotation, no nitrogen replenishment. The neighboring farmers were doing exactly the same thing. The whole village was slowly starving itself, one bad harvest at a time. Nobody knew why. The local priest said the gods were displeased with sinners. The mayor blamed bad weather and old foreign curses. I looked at the soil and I knew exactly what was wrong. They were farming like it was the year 1200, because for them it was. So I started small, very small. I told my new mother that the fever had given me strange dreams about plants and seeds and dark earth. She nodded politely, the way you nod at a child who claims to be friends with the moon. Then I went out to the backfield to work. I separated a small plot, about 10 paces across, and I added crushed eggshells for calcium. I mixed in old wood ash for natural potassium. I buried fish scraps deep under the soil for nitrogen. Nobody in this village ate fish heads, so they were basically free fertilizer. Then I planted 3 crops together in the same plot. Beans, squash, and corn. All 3 growing right next to each other on purpose. In my old world, indigenous farmers had figured this combination out 1,000 years ago. The beans fix nitrogen into the soil naturally. The squash leaves shade the ground and hold moisture in. The corn gives the beans something tall to climb up. 3 crops working together. It was farming on easy mode, and nobody here had ever heard of it. Then, and only then, I activated my completely useless magic skill. Overgrowth. 10% faster growth. I activated it every single morning at sunrise, exactly when the plants were drinking the most light. 2 weeks passed quietly. Then my mother came out to the back field one morning and stopped walking. She dropped her water bucket. She just stood there staring. The bean plants were already as tall as her waist. The corn was knee-high. The squash leaves were huge. She slowly looked over at me. I shrugged my shoulders. "Good dreams," I said. She crossed herself 3 times and walked back into the house. By week 4, the harvest from that one tiny plot was bigger than our entire field had produced the previous year. My mother just cried. Not sad crying. The other kind. The kind where you realize you might actually eat real food this winter and survive until spring comes. She kept asking me how I had done it. I kept telling her I just had a feeling about the dirt this season. It was not a great answer. She kept looking at me like she suspected I had been replaced by a forest spirit. Which, in fairness to her instincts, was not entirely wrong. Word started to spread through this village. Country gossip moves slow, but it always moves. People notice when one farm has full bellies. The neighbor on the left, an old man named Bren, came by and asked if I would give the same blessing to his dying field this year. I said no. He spit at my feet, called me selfish, and walked off. That was strike 1 against me in the long memory of village politics. The neighbor on the right, a kind widow named Petra, brought me a fresh loaf of warm bread and politely asked me the exact same question. She did not spit. I gave her some of my engineered bean seeds and a small list of instructions written in charcoal on dried leather. 3 weeks later, Petra's small field was thriving in the late summer sun. Bren's larger field was already starting to wither and die. Bren told the village priest that I had personally cursed his land with dark magic. He was loud about it. He told everyone who would listen. The priest came to our farm with 3 other men. He held up a wooden symbol of his god and asked me to swear I was not in Dark League. I swore on the symbol. He squinted at me for a long, uncomfortable moment. He looked at my crops. Then he left without saying one word. My mother spent the rest of that day crying again. But this time, for a completely different reason than before. A much worse reason. The kind of crying where you suddenly realize your friendly village neighbors might come back at night and burn your entire house down. I should have stopped there. A smart, careful man would have absolutely stopped right there. I am not a smart, careful man, unfortunately. I'm a curious scientist with a useless magic skill and an entire fantasy world full of unsolved agricultural problems waiting for me. I started experimenting with crossbreeding next. In this world, every plant grew in its own corner, doing its own thing, never mixing. Nobody had figured out yet that you could deliberately combine 2 different plants to create something better and stronger and brand new. They believed all plant varieties were just what the gods gave us at the beginning of time. It was honestly an adorable belief system. I started by combining a hardy mountain wheat with a sweeter lowland wheat strain. Then I activated overgrowth daily on the new seedlings. By week 6, I'd created a wheat strain that grew in poor soil, resisted hard frost, and produced almost double the grain per stalk. I had also, completely accidentally, attracted some seriously unwanted attention from people I really did not want noticing me. A traveling merchant passed through our small village one afternoon. He saw my mother's overflowing root cellar in the middle of summer. A hard summer. He asked her questions. My poor mother, bless her heart forever, is completely incapable of telling a lie to anyone. She told the merchant all about her son's blessed touch with the soil. The merchant smiled. He thanked her. He left town that night. 2 weeks later, 3 men in dark blue royal robes arrived at our front gate. The Royal Mage Council had officially arrived in person. I knew they were trouble the moment I saw them, because nobody in this entire village had ever owned a pair of shoes that clean before. The lead mage was a thin man with a sharp nose and the specific cold energy of someone who has never said please in his entire life. He introduced himself as Inspector Varnon. He said he had heard unusual reports about strange magical plant growth in our small region. He had personally come to investigate the matter. He did not ask anyone. He told. He walked straight past my mother into our house. He ate our bread. He drank our cider. He demanded to be shown the fields. I followed him out because I did not have very much choice. He was carrying a staff that glowed a faint, steady blue color, and I had inherited a young body still terrified of all authority figures. Inspector Varnon walked the fields very slowly. He picked up handfuls of dark soil. He examined the leaves of my crossbred wheat closely. He held one of my engineered bean pods up to the bright afternoon sun. Then he made a small, deeply disgusted sound from his throat. Then he slowly turned to face me. "Boy," he said, What is your magical class and your awakened ability? Speak truthfully now, peasant. I told him. Peasant, overgrowth. Plants grow 10% faster. He stared at me for a very long, suspicious, and deeply silent moment. Then he laughed. Genuinely laughed out loud. The kind of laugh from a man who has been told a joke so stupid it became amusing again. Overgrowth, he repeated slowly. And you use this pathetic, completely useless ability to grow all of these strange new crops here? I nodded my head. He laughed again. Then his whole face went completely flat. The amusement vanished. Something colder replaced it instantly. Then how, Inspector Varnon said very quietly, did you create new species of plant that exist nowhere in the Royal Botanical Index? The air in the entire field suddenly changed. The two other mages behind him stopped looking bored. They started looking very interested. My mother, who had been watching us anxiously from the porch the whole time, went completely still. Her hand covered her mouth slowly. I tried the village idiot routine. I scratched my head dumbly. I said something about how maybe the gods had blessed the seeds this year. I fully expected him to slap me across the face for the lie. Instead, he smiled. It was not a kind smile or a forgiving smile at all. It was the patient smile of a man who has just caught a much, much bigger fish than he was actually expecting to catch on a slow day. You know what I think, peasant boy? Inspector Varnon said softly. I think you are lying. I think you have a second hidden ability. Maybe a subclass. Maybe something the official awakening ceremony failed to detect properly. And you have been hiding it the whole time. He took one slow step closer to me. Do you know what we do, peasant? He whispered. To people who hide magical abilities from the crown? I had made a huge mistake. In this world, creating new plant species was not considered farming. It was something else entirely different. It was, apparently, something the Royal Mage Council had a very specific word for, and that word was not agricultural innovation. Inspector Varnon pointed the tip of his glowing staff directly at my chest. His voice became sharper, colder, completely without warmth. Peasant Aldrich, he said, by the authority of the crown, you will accompany us back to the capital for full magical examination. If you resist arrest, we are fully authorized to use force against you and against your mother. Do you understand me clearly, boy? I understood. I understood very, very clearly. I also understood that if I went to the capital with these men, I was never coming back. I looked at my mother standing on the small wooden porch. She had both hands pressed tight over her mouth. Her eyes were full of tears. The fear in her eyes was something I had only seen once before, in my old life, on the face of a researcher whose visa was revoked. So I did the only thing I could think of doing in that moment. I stalled. I bowed deeply, like the dumb village idiot I was supposed to be. Yes, my lord, I said quickly. Of course, my lord. I just need to gather my belongings for the journey. May I please have 1 hour? Inspector Varnon looked at me with the expression of a man who had probably seen this exact stall tactic about 400 times before, but he nodded once. 1 hour, peasant. Run, and your mother answers personally for it. Do not test my patience with you any further. He posted 1 mage at the front gate and 1 mage at the back gate. Then he sat down on our porch and helped himself to more of our bread. I went inside the house. I climbed the small ladder up to my tiny loft bedroom. I sat down on the straw mat and thought about my life. Here's what I knew. The Royal Mage Council did not like new things. They had a system, a hierarchy, a list of approved classes and powers. They had a botanical index that cataloged every plant species in the entire known kingdom. And I had just punched a hole through their book. They were not taking me back to the capital to give me some kind of medal or reward. They were taking me there to make me disappear quietly. My unnatural knowledge would die with me, locked away inside a small, dark, soundproof room somewhere beneath the Royal Mage Tower itself. I also knew something else, something they did not know. Because here's the real truth about my so-called useless skill. Overgrowth. I had been lying. Not to them, to myself. For weeks now, overgrowth was not actually what these people thought that it was at all. In my first month of careful experimenting, I had noticed something deeply strange. When I activated overgrowth, plants did more than grow. They grew differently. They were greener. Their root systems were much deeper. They were drawing something from the soil they should not. And on the 7th week of experimenting, I had finally figured out exactly what it was. They were absorbing mana, pure magical energy. The same energy these royal mages channeled through their staffs. The same energy that powered every single spell in this entire kingdom. My plants were eating it. They were drinking it up like cold water on a hot day. And the more mana they drank, the more they wanted. I had been very careful so far. Only small plots, only in private, only on plants I could keep my own watchful eyes on every single day. Because deep down, the trained scientist in me was honestly terrified of what would happen if I let it grow without proper supervision. But right now, with 3 royal mages waiting on my porch to drag me away in chains, supervision was no longer my biggest concern at all. I climbed back down the wooden ladder. I walked quietly into the small storage room behind the kitchen, and I picked up my hidden jar. I had been carefully crossbreeding a special plant for the last 2 weeks in secret. I had started the project with 3 different things: a common climbing wall vine, a carnivorous swamp plant the locals around here all simply called marshmouth because of how it ate flies, and a rare mountain ivy that, according to my mother's old folk stories, supposedly drank the magic right out of cold standing stones. I had carefully combined all 3 together. I had fed the new seedling tiny amounts of mana every morning for 2 whole weeks. By the time the inspector arrived at our gate, I had exactly 12 seeds saved inside a small clay jar hidden in the storage room. I had been planning to plant them somewhere safe and remote, somewhere I could study them under controlled conditions, but plans change fast. I tucked the small clay jar carefully inside my shirt. I grabbed a small sack of normal supplies to make it look like I was packing. He gestured at the dirt road leading out of the village. We walked. My mother stood in the doorway and silently watched me leave with them. I gave her one last long look as we passed through the gate. I tried to say with my eyes everything that I could not say with my words. "I'm coming back, Mother. I promise you, I promise." We walked for almost a full hour, the 4 of us, down that dusty dirt road together. We were heading toward the next town over, where Inspector Varnon's official carriage was waiting to take us back to the distant capital. I memorized every single step of the journey along that road. Every single one. I am not joking when I tell you this small detail. I memorized the exact distance between our village and the first cluster of old pine trees. I memorized where the dirt road dipped down. I memorized a patch of unused, abandoned field right before the river crossing, the one with cracked, dry soil nobody had farmed in years. That was the spot. That was my one and only chance. Right as we were crossing through that abandoned field, I pretended to stumble badly. I went down hard on one knee. Inspector Varnon turned to bark at me for slowing him down. And while I was kneeling there in the dried dust, I quietly emptied the entire clay jar into the cracked field dirt. 12 seeds, pressed deep down into the dry soil with my own thumb. I stood up. I brushed the dust off of my pants. I apologized for slowing them down. He grunted at me, and then we just kept on walking. I activated overgrowth one last time as we were leaving that field. Just a small pulse of energy, just enough to gently wake them all up. Then we walked away from that field. I tried very hard not to look back over my shoulder even once, not even one single time. We reached the next town over by sundown. We got into the official carriage waiting at the inn. We rode for 2 long days to the capital. I was placed in a stone cell beneath the Royal Mage Tower itself. They fed me dry stale bread. They asked me questions I refused to answer. I told them I was just a simple peasant, that I did not understand anything they were saying, that maybe a forest spirit blessed our fields. They did not believe a single word I said. Not one. Inspector Varnon visited my cell once a day to update me on certain new developments. He reminded me that my poor mother was now being monitored for her own safety back home in the village. The threat was not very subtle. On the very early morning of the 3rd day, the prison guards came down. They unlocked my cell. They walked me up to the open courtyard. The High Mage himself was waiting for me there. An old man with a long white beard, 3 glowing rings on each hand, and very dead eyes. The kind of cold eyes that have spent 40 long years personally deciding which people lived and which people quietly died in dark cells. He read the charges against me out loud. Unnatural manipulation of nature, creation of unsanctioned new species against royal botanical law, refusal to fully cooperate with an active royal investigation, and then he slowly raised his glowing staff in his old ring-covered hand. He spoke the words I told you about at the very beginning of all this. Peasant Aldrich, confess your dark pact, or burn in the morning. I looked up at him. I looked at the small patch of suspiciously green wheat growing through the cracks of the courtyard stones behind him. That wheat patch was definitely not there yesterday. I'm absolutely sure of that. I had checked. Twice. And I smiled at the old High Mage, because 2 full days had passed since I planted those 12 special seeds in a cracked, dry, abandoned field. 2 full days of growth. 60 miles outside of the capital. With my overgrowth ability activated on them as a parting gift. 2 whole days of constant feeding. I did not know exactly what was about to happen next. Not exactly. But I had a pretty good guess. A really good educated guess. And from the way the courtyard stones were starting to crack just a little louder under my bare feet, I think my guess was probably right. The High Mage frowned down at me. "What exactly are you smiling about, peasant boy?" he asked. His voice was suddenly less certain than before. I looked up at him. I felt the very faintest tremor moving through the ground beneath us, somewhere, deep underneath the capital itself. Something was already moving. Moving toward us, toward this very courtyard. something I had personally planted, something that was hungry, something that had been drinking the cold, dry soil completely empty for 2 long days, and was finally ready for something bigger. I took one slow, calm breath in. "My lord," I said politely, "I think there has been a small misunderstanding here today between us. Drop a comment right now and tell me one thing honestly. If you woke up with the most useless magic skill possible, would you cause this much trouble in just 2 short months? Be honest down below." The High Mage's staff was still pointing at my chest when the ground underneath the entire Royal Mage Tower started to shake. Hard, very hard. Not an earthquake. Earthquakes don't move in straight lines. This was something else. This was something walking toward us under the dirt. The 2 guards standing behind the High Mage looked at each other nervously. One of them whispered, "My lord, the floor is..." Then he stopped. He stopped because something green had just pushed itself up between the stones at his feet. A small tendril, curling, reaching, hungry. The guard backed up 3 steps and bumped into a wall. The tendril followed him, slowly, like it could actually smell where he was standing. I watched the High Mage's expression shift in real time. He had stopped looking at me. He was now looking at the floor of his own courtyard. The floor was no longer his courtyard. The floor was cracking. The stones were lifting, and from underneath, thick green vines were rising up. Not just any vines, my vines. The 12 seeds I had planted 2 days ago in a dead field 60 miles from here. They had been busy traveling. I want to take a moment and explain something. In my old life, I studied something called rhizomatic root networks. It's a fancy science term. It basically means certain plants don't just grow up. They also grow sideways, underground, spreading roots across hundreds of feet quietly. Bamboo does this. So does mint. So does, apparently, whatever the heck I had created with my carnivorous swamp vine and magic mountain ivy. Except my version wasn't crawling 100 feet. My version was crawling for 60 miles. And it had been drinking magic the whole way over. Every mana node it passed underground, it absorbed. Every patch of enchanted soil, every old magical artifact buried in the dirt, all of it. By the time my vines reached the capital, they were not regular vines anymore. They were something the Royal Botanical Index did not have a name for. The High Mage finally looked back at me. His face was white. "What did you do?" he whispered. I shrugged. "I grew some grass, my lord." The vines erupted through the courtyard stones in a dozen places at once. Thick green ropes thicker than a man's arm, pulsing with green light. The 2 guards drew their swords and started swinging at them. The vines didn't bleed. They didn't die. They split into 2 and kept growing. One of the guards screamed for backup. He screamed for a long time. Nobody came. Because the vines had reached the tower walls by then. I watched a single tendril wrap itself around one of the magical lanterns on the courtyard wall. The lantern's light flickered, then dimmed. Then the light went out completely. The vine that had touched it glowed brighter. The plant had just eaten the lantern's enchantment whole. I looked at the High Mage. He looked at me. We were both starting to understand what was happening here. He was understanding much faster. "Stop them," he said. "Stop them right now, and I will let you live, peasant." I tilted my head and pretended to think about it carefully. Then I gave him my best confused village idiot face. "My lord," I said, "I don't know how. I'm just a simple farmer with a useless skill. I have to be honest with you. That was a small lie. I knew exactly how to stop them. They were my plants. I had bred them. I had a connection. But I had no intention of telling him that. Not while my mother was being monitored for her safety, 60 miles away in our village." The High Mage raised his staff and shouted a word in a language I didn't understand. A wave of blue fire rolled across the courtyard floor. The fire hit the vines. The vines drank the fire. They didn't burn. They drank. They glowed blue for a few seconds and then kept growing. Mana. Fire is made of mana in this world. I had built plants that ate exactly that. The High Mage had just fed them his most expensive spell. He stared at the vines in pure horror. He had spent 40 years of his life mastering magic, and the magic was now being eaten by a vegetable. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Then I remembered he had been 3 seconds from setting me on fire, and the sympathy disappeared fast. The courtyard doors burst open. A dozen more royal mages flooded in. They were all wearing serious robes and carrying serious-looking staffs. The lead one was Inspector Varnon, my old friend. He took one look at the courtyard, at the vines, at the High Mage's pale face, and froze. He pointed at me. "He did this! He has a hidden ability. I knew it." The High Mage held up one shaking hand. "Stop talking, Varnon. Be silent." The new mages tried different spells. Lightning, ice, wind. The vines drank every single one. With every drained spell, they grew bigger. Now they were twice as thick. The leaves on them were the size of cooking pots, and they were starting to bloom. Big purple flowers opened up. The purple flowers tilted toward the mages. slowly, like sunflowers tracking the sun, except these flowers were tracking magical energy users. I realized something then. My plants weren't just eating mana from spells, they were starting to sense mana from people, the mages themselves. One of the younger mages took a step backward. A vine immediately whipped across the courtyard toward him. He yelped and dropped his staff. The vine grabbed the staff. The staff was glowing. The vine glowed brighter. 3 seconds later, the staff was just a piece of dead wood. The mage stared at his now useless staff. His face went pale. 40 years of enchantments. Drained. Gone. By a plant. In 3 seconds flat. The high mage turned to me again. His voice was different now, smaller. "Boy, Aldrich, please. I will release you. I will pardon you. Anything. Just stop the plants." I have to admit, that was a tempting offer. I considered it for about half a second. Then I thought about my mother. I thought about Inspector Varnon sitting on our porch eating our bread. I thought about being dragged here in a carriage for 2 whole days. I thought about being kept in a stone cell and threatened with execution because I had figured out how to grow food in a starving kingdom. I looked at the high mage. I said, "My lord, I think the gods are displeased. Maybe the plants will stop if you release the prisoner first." His eye twitched. "You are the prisoner?" I shrugged. "Then maybe the gods are even more displeased than I realized." His other eye twitched. A vine wrapped itself around the high mage's left ankle. He looked down. The vine was glowing faintly. His ankle bracelet was glowing too. I knew that bracelet. I had seen it on every senior mage in this tower. It was a mana storage device. They wore them like emergency batteries. The vine started drinking. The bracelet started dimming. The high mage felt his power literally being pulled out of his body in real time. He shrieked. He shrieked a word. A guard rushed forward with a sword and cut the vine off his ankle. The vine dropped to the ground and died for about 2 seconds, and then it grew back, twice as thick, and it brought friends. A dozen other vines started reaching for the high mage now. He ran. The high mage of the Royal Mage Council, the most powerful magic user in the entire kingdom, turned around and ran out of his courtyard. He left his staff behind. He left his own guards behind. He left me behind. He just ran. The other mages watched him run, and then they ran too. Inspector Varnon was the last to leave. He looked at me one final time. The look in his eyes was complicated. Hatred, fear, and something else. Curiosity. He was a smart man. He had figured out something the high mage hadn't figured out yet. I wasn't controlling the plants from here. I couldn't be. I was standing in chains in the middle of the courtyard. But the plants were avoiding me completely. Not one vine touched me. Varnon pointed at me as he backed away through the broken courtyard door. "I will find your mother," he said quietly. Then he was gone. I went cold. Not metaphorically, actually cold. The kind of cold that comes when you realize you have just made the most powerful enemy alive. The vines, sensing nobody else was in the courtyard to drink, started slowing down. They settled. They wrapped themselves around the walls. They turned the entire courtyard into a green cathedral in about 4 minutes. Then they went still, waiting for more food or more orders. I stood there in the middle of my own creation, completely alone, still wearing chains, and I realized something kind of terrifying. I had no plan for what to do next. I had been so focused on not dying in the next 5 minutes that I hadn't thought about minute 6. I looked around the courtyard. The vines watched me back. I'm not joking. The purple flowers had all turned toward me. They were waiting for instructions. I raised one hand experimentally. The closest vine moved. Just a small twitch, but it moved in the exact direction I waved. So I waved my hand toward my chains. The vine slithered across the floor. It wrapped itself around the iron lock on my wrist. It glowed bright. The lock dimmed. The metal turned brittle. I twisted my wrist, and the chain shattered like dry bread. The vine retreated, satisfied with itself. I looked at the courtyard exit. The doors were broken open. The street outside was visible. I could hear distant screaming from the city. The screaming was getting louder, not quieter, which meant my vines had not stayed in just this courtyard. They were spreading through the capital. I took my first free step in 3 days. I walked toward the broken doors. The vines parted for me like I was royalty. The flowers tracked me. I walked out into the street. What I saw made me stop walking for a long moment. The street was full of vines, every wall, every alley. Green tendrils were climbing up the buildings, drinking from the magical street lamps, eating the enchantments off shop signs, slowly, methodically, like they were grazing. The capital was a feast. Every single building in this city was full of mana, and my plants knew it. People were running, not toward the vines, away from them. Mothers carrying children, merchants abandoning their carts of expensive goods. A baker was running with a tray of fresh bread still in his hands. The vines ignored him completely. They weren't interested in regular people. They were only interested in magical things. The Mage Tower, the Royal Armory, the enchanted statues in the central plaza, things like that. I realized something then. I had not created monsters. I had created very polite, very focused, very specialized magical garden weeds. Big weeds, very big weeds, the kind of weeds that swallowed buildings. But still, weeds, with clear preferences and clear table manners. I started walking through the city. The vines parted for me everywhere I went. The few citizens who saw me stopped running and stared at me. A small boy pointed at me and said, "Mama, the plant man is here." His mother grabbed him and ran the other way. I didn't blame her. I was barefoot, in chains, covered in cell dust, walking through a city being eaten by my own science experiment. I looked unhinged. I was a little unhinged, to be honest. But I had a goal now. I had remembered something important. Inspector Varnon had said two things. He had said, "I will find your mother." And earlier, he had said her village was being monitored. That meant he had men there already. That meant I needed to get home, fast, before he reached our farm, before he did something to her that I could never undo or forgive myself for. The problem was that I was in the capital. The capital was 60 miles from my village. I had no horse, no money, no food, no friends. I had only one thing. I had an army of magical vines that were currently eating an entire city full of expensive enchantments. So that was something. I stopped walking. I looked at the closest vine. I held up my hand. The flowers all turned toward me again. I said, "Take me home." I felt embarrassed saying it out loud, like talking to a houseplant. But the vines understood. They moved. They moved in a way I had not expected. 3 of the largest vines slithered toward me. They twisted around each other. They formed a shape, a flat platform, maybe 6 feet across. Then the vines underneath that platform started growing, fast, lifting me up off the ground. I stumbled and almost fell off. I held on tight. The platform rose 10 feet, then 20, then it leaned forward and started moving down the street, carrying me like a leaf on a slow river. I looked down at my feet. I was riding a hovering platform of magical carnivorous vines through a fantasy city. I had absolutely peaked here. In my old life, the most exciting thing I ever rode was a bicycle through a graduate research conference. I had never even owned a car. Now I was being chauffeured by my own science experiment, past the burning enchanted statues of dead kings. I had genuinely peaked. The vines carried me to the city gates. The guards there had abandoned their posts. The gates were wide open. The road stretched out ahead. The vines did not stop at the gates. They kept going. They pulled themselves along the roadside ditches. They flowed across the open fields. The platform underneath me moved fluidly. The vines underneath grew, deposited themselves. And the next set grew further ahead, always rolling. I was moving faster than a horse, probably faster than 3 horses. The wind in my face was actually kind of nice. I almost enjoyed it. Then I remembered the situation. My mother, Inspector Varnon, the fact that I was now a wanted criminal in an entire kingdom. The enjoyment ended. The vines covered 60 miles in about 3 hours. We arrived at the edge of my village just before sunset. The sky was orange. The air was cold. The vines lowered the platform to the ground gently. I stepped off onto familiar dirt, the same dirt road I had walked down with Inspector Varnon. The platform of vines did not leave. It curled up at the edge of the village like a giant green dog waiting for its owner. Patient, watchful. I started walking toward our farm. I could see the house from here, the smoke from the chimney, the fence I had repaired last month myself. It looked normal. Too normal. There were no extra horses, no guards, no signs that anyone had arrived to monitor anyone, just our quiet house. That worried me more than anything else could have, because Inspector Varnon had a 2-day head start on me. He should have been here already. Unless he wasn't planning to take my mother to the capital. Unless he was planning to wait here. For me to come home with my magical plants. I stopped walking. I looked at the house. I looked at the vines waiting at the village edge. I made a decision. I walked alone toward the house. I called out, "Mother, it's me, it's Aldrich." Silence for a long moment. Then the door opened. My mother stood there, alive, unharmed, crying. She ran across the yard and grabbed me so hard my ribs creaked. She was saying things in between her sobs. I couldn't make out most of the words, but I heard, "They came. They asked about you. They said terrible things." I pulled back and looked at her face carefully. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "They left 2 hours ago. They said they were going to bring reinforcements." I nodded slowly. That made sense. That fit. "Mother," I said, "we have to leave, right now, tonight." She looked at me with confused, frightened eyes. "Leave? Aldrich, this is our home." I sat her down on the front step. I told her everything. The truth. All of it. The other world. My old life. The plants. The mana. Everything. I had been planning to keep the secret forever, but the secret was no longer mine alone. The whole kingdom now knew something was different. My mother listened without interrupting. Her face went through about 15 different emotions. She didn't say I was crazy. That surprised me. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "The fever, when you were sick, I thought I lost my real son." She paused. And then a different boy woke up. He was kind, but different. He looked at me like he had never seen me before. She looked at me carefully. I knew Aldrich. I knew from the first day. I just didn't have a word for what I knew. She touched my cheek with one rough hand. "It's okay." I almost cried. I'd been carrying that secret for 2 months. Carrying it had been heavier than I realized. She was lifting it off me now. "But we still have to leave," I said quietly. She nodded. "Where do we go?" That was the question. I didn't have an answer prepared yet. I had not thought past the part where I escaped execution and rescued my mother. The actual long-term plan was, as scientists call it, missing. I stood up. I looked toward the village edge where my vines were still waiting patiently. They had not moved. They were watching me, loyal. I turned back to my mother. "Pack one bag, only essential things. We need to disappear before Varnon comes back with more men." She nodded fast. She moved with the calm efficiency of a woman who had survived 2 famines and a war in her lifetime. She knew how to pack to disappear. While she packed, I walked back to the village edge. I stood in front of the vines. The flowers all turned toward me, waiting for orders. "I need you to do something for me," I said. "I need you to go back, all the way back, to wherever you came from. I need a safe place." The vines didn't move. They just watched me. I tried again. "I need to grow a forest, a real one, somewhere hidden, somewhere no one can find." The biggest vine moved. It pointed itself toward the north, toward a place I had heard the villagers talk about but had never visited myself. The Blackwood, the cursed forest at the northern edge of the kingdom, the one nobody entered, the one the maps marked with a warning symbol, the one where, according to local legends, magic had been broken long ago and nothing grew right anymore, the one with the most dead mana in the kingdom. In other words, an all-you-can-eat buffet for my plants. The vines were not asking me. They were telling me that was where they wanted to go. I nodded slowly. "All right, the Blackwood it is. But first, we need to make sure my mother gets there safely. Can you carry both of us?" The vines reshaped themselves immediately. The platform expanded. It became wider, softer, with small woven walls around the edges to hold us in. It looked, I noticed, almost like a small carriage. The vines were learning. They were learning fast, faster than they should have, probably. My mother came out of the house with one packed bag and an iron pot. She had brought the iron pot. I almost laughed. I didn't laugh. She looked at the carriage of vines. Then she looked at me. Then she sighed deeply. "Aldrich," she said, "my whole life has been very normal. This is not normal." She climbed onto the vine carriage anyway. She sat down in the middle. She put her iron pot on her lap. She nodded at me. "All right," she said. "Let's go." I climbed up next to her. I gave the vines the mental command. They lifted us up gently. We started moving. We rode north toward the Blackwood as the sun set behind us. My mother held her iron pot. I held the side of the carriage. The wind was cold. Behind us, I could see torchlight on the road from the south. Many torches. More men were coming. Varnon had not been bluffing about reinforcements. But they were too late. By the time they reached our empty house, we would be 30 miles north. By morning, we would be in the cursed forest. And by next week, the Blackwood would not be a cursed forest anymore. It would be something else, something completely new, something I was building. Drop a comment below and tell me what you would name a forest that eats magic. The best name might just become canon. I'm taking suggestions. The Blackwood looked exactly like a place where bad decisions came to die, and I was about to make this place my home. With my mother, voluntarily. The trees were gray, not the gray of winter, the gray of something that had stopped trying to be alive 100 years ago and forgot how. The ground was cracked. The air smelled like old metal. There were no birds, no insects, no sound of anything moving anywhere in the forest. The vine carriage stopped at the edge of the tree line. The vines themselves were hesitating. I could feel it. They were nervous about this place. My mother gripped her iron pot tighter. She looked at the dead forest. Then she looked at me. "Aldrich," she said quietly, "this is wrong." I nodded. "I know." I stepped off the carriage. The dirt under my feet had no give to it. It was packed down like concrete. Nothing grew here. I knelt and picked up a handful of the gray dirt. I rubbed it between my fingers. I sniffed it. I tasted a tiny bit because I am a scientist. The dirt tasted like nothing. Not bad, not bitter, just nothing. Like someone had pulled the life out of it and left only the shape behind. But here's the thing the locals didn't understand. The thing the royal mages had written off centuries ago in their fancy books. This soil was not dead, it was sleeping. There's a very big difference. Dead soil has nothing in it. Sleeping soil has everything just resting. I had seen this in my old life. After major industrial spills, after volcanic eruptions, after nuclear test sites, soil that looked completely dead. But underneath, the bacteria, the fungi, the trace nutrients were all still there, waiting. They needed one thing to wake them back up again. A trigger, something to remind them how to be alive. Mana, in this world, was that trigger. And I had brought a whole carriage full of it. I stood up. I turned to the vines. "Plant yourselves here," I said. "Not deep, just on the surface. Spread out. Cover this clearing first." The vines moved. They unwound themselves from the carriage shape. They flowed across the gray dirt like green water spilling out of a glass. They spread in a perfect circle around me. They sank tendrils into the cracked earth. They started doing what I had bred them to do best. They started giving back. The mana they had absorbed in the capital, the enchantments they had eaten, the magical energy from the bracelets, all of it. They were pumping it back into the ground, slowly, carefully, like a doctor giving a blood transfusion to a patient nearly gone. My mother watched all this from the carriage, which was now just a small pile of leftover vines. She had not moved. She was barely breathing. "Aldrich," she whispered, "the ground is changing." I looked down. She was right. The gray was starting to go away, slowly, from the center out. The dirt was turning brown, real brown, healthy brown. The kind of brown that smells like life and rain in the start of growing season. A small green shoot pushed up through the dirt about 10 feet away. Just a tiny one, a blade of grass. The first new growth in this forest. Maybe in 200 years. I knelt down next to it. I activated overgrowth. The grass blade shot up. It became a bush, then a small tree. In less than 30 seconds, I had grown a fully formed sapling from nothing. My mother made a sound behind me. Half a gasp, half a prayer. I stood back up. I felt something I had not felt in 2 months. I felt completely calm. For the first time since waking up in this body. Real calm. This was what I was supposed to do here. This was the actual point. Not surviving, not running, not hiding, not even getting revenge on the mages. The point was this: restoring something dead, building something new, using the knowledge from my old world to fix the broken parts of this one. The Royal Mage Council had executed people for less. The Royal Mage Council had decided which plants got to exist and which didn't. Decided, like the natural world needed their permission to grow. They had picked a fight with the wrong reincarnated agricultural scientist. They really had. I turned to my mother. She was watching me with an expression I had seen before. Pride, fear, something in between. Mostly pride this time. "We are going to build something here," I said quietly. "A new forest, a safe place, a place nobody can take from us." She nodded slowly. "And the mages?" she asked. I looked back at the gray trees. Most of the blackwood was still dead. Miles and miles of it. Endless gray bones. "They won't come here," I said. "They're afraid of this place. They have been afraid of it for 2 centuries. We are going to use that fear." We made camp at the edge of the now growing patch of forest. My mother started a small fire. She set up her iron pot. She had brought salt. She had brought dried meat. She had brought a single small loaf of bread. She was a woman who had survived 2 famines. She knew how to pack. I sat next to her by the fire. The sky above us was clear. The stars were out. They were brighter here than I had ever seen them anywhere. There was no city glow, no magical street lamps, no torches, just darkness and stars. I felt like I was looking up at them for the first time. I had not looked at stars much in my old life. Always too busy, always too tired, always too distracted by something on a glowing screen. Now I had time. I had nothing but time, and a mission, and a mother, and about 100 magical vines that were redesigning a dead forest. We slept under the stars that first night. The vines built us a small shelter, not from wood, from living plants woven together carefully. It was the most comfortable bed I had slept in since waking up in this world. The vines kept us warm. They moved slightly with our breathing. In the morning, the patch of healed forest had doubled in size. The vines had been working all night, restoring soil, waking up old bacteria. A few small birds had appeared from somewhere. They were sitting on the new branches, watching us. They had not seen humans in a long time. My mother fed them crumbs from her bread. They came right up to her hand. She laughed. I had not heard her laugh like that since I woke up. And we spent the next 3 weeks doing nothing but growing. The vines spread. The forest expanded. New trees pushed up through the gray dirt daily. I crossbred plants. I created hybrids the world had never seen. I made an apple tree that grew fruit the size of a man's head in 2 weeks. I made a wheat strain that could grow in this strange forest soil. I made vines that produced sweet sap you could drink straight from the leaf. I made flowers that gave off light at night. Real light. The kind that came from absorbing mana during the day and releasing it after sunset. The healed section of the blackwood was now bright, at night, like a glowing oasis in the middle of a dead gray landscape, visible from far away. That worried me a little. It was too visible. But the gray forest around us was so big and so feared that I doubted anyone would come close. I was wrong about that. Of course I was wrong. I was always wrong about things like that. 3 weeks and 4 days after we arrived, we had visitors. Not royal mages. That would have been easier. Mages I knew how to handle. Mages had clear motivations. They wanted to control or to kill me. These visitors were different. They were children, 3 of them, walking out of the gray forest. Skinny, dirty, scared. About 10 years old. The tallest was a boy with dark hair. The middle one was a girl with red hair full of leaves. The smallest was another girl who clutched a doll. They came out of the gray trees into our healed clearing, and they stopped and they stared. The way you stare at something you can't believe. My mother saw them first. She froze. Then she did what mothers do. She walked toward them slowly, with her hands held out, palms up, no threat. "It's all right," she said gently. "Are you children hurt? Are you hungry?" The smallest girl with the doll started crying immediately. Loud. The boy stepped in front of his sisters protectively. His face had a scar across his cheek. He held up a sharpened stick like it was a sword. "Stay back," he said. His voice was hoarse, like he had not used it in a while. My mother stopped where she was. She knelt down in the dirt. "My name is Helga," she said. "This is my son. We mean you no harm. We have food. We have warm shelter. You're safe here." The boy stared. He looked at her for a long time. He looked at me. He looked at the glowing flowers behind us. He looked back at his sisters. He lowered the stick. He started crying. The kind of crying a child does when they have been brave for too long, and someone has finally given them permission to stop. My mother gathered all 3 children into her arms at once, like she had been waiting for this moment her entire life, like they were hers. Maybe they were now. I went into the small hut the vines had grown for us. I brought out bread. I brought out apples from my new trees. The children ate like they had not eaten in days, maybe weeks. The smallest girl finished an entire apple in under a minute, core included. When they had eaten, the boy started talking. His name was Thomas. His sisters were Mira and Lyra. They were from a village in the deep north. Their village had been raided 3 months ago by soldiers. The boy did not say whose soldiers. He just said men with armor and torches. The men had burned everything. The boy had hidden his sisters in a root cellar. When the men left, only the 3 of them remained alive. They had walked south for weeks, looking for help. They had been turned away from 3 other villages. People did not have food to spare. Finally, they had heard rumors from a traveling merchant about a glowing forest in the cursed Blackwood. They had walked toward the rumor. Most people said the rumors were lies, the boy said quietly, or said the glow was evil, said it would eat anyone who came close. He paused, but we had nowhere else to go. My mother held the smallest girl tightly. The girl had fallen asleep against her shoulder, already trusting. I looked at the boy. He had a face that was way too old for his age, the face of a child who had been the adult in his family for too long. I knew what was going to happen next. I knew before I even opened my mouth. I looked at my mother. She looked at me. She nodded once. "You can stay with us," I said. "As long as you want. Forever, if that's what you need." The boy started crying again, quietly this time. The middle girl, Mira, who had not spoken yet, suddenly said one word. "Promise?" I looked at her. "I promise. You're home now. All 3 of you." That night, our hut grew larger. The vines understood without being told. They added 2 more rooms. They made small beds out of soft moss. The 3 children slept in the same bed anyway, holding each other. I think they had been doing that for so long they didn't know how to stop. My mother sat by the fire and cried a little. She did not let me see, but I saw. I sat next to her. I did not say anything. Words would have ruined it. She had lost a son, her real son, the one who had been here before me. She had been mothering a stranger for 2 months without saying a word. And now she had 3 more children. And I was watching her remember how to be the mother she had always been before grief had stolen it. The next morning the children were already running around our growing forest. The girls were chasing the small birds. The boy was watching me. I was breeding a new plant, something I had been working on for a week. The boy stood quietly a few feet away. He didn't ask questions yet. I let him watch. Eventually he said, "What are you making?" I held up the seedling. It had 2 heads, 2 different colors on one stem. "I am crossing a healing herb with a glowing flower," I said. "I want to make a plant that lights up brighter when someone nearby is sick." The boy stared at the seedling. "You can do that?" I nodded. "I think so. The healing herb senses illness. The flower stores mana for light. If I combine them right, it will glow when someone is sick, get dimmer when they get better. A living medical alarm, for free, forever." The boy was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Can you teach me how to do that?" I looked at him. He was 10 years old. He had a scar on his face. He had walked 200 miles to find a glowing forest because he had nothing left to lose, and he was asking me to teach him agriculture. Yes, I said. Of course I can. He sat down in the dirt next to me. He picked up a small handful of seeds. He held them carefully, like treasure. That was the first day. He never missed a lesson after that. Thomas had a mind like a sponge. Quiet, focused, hungry to understand the world. He learned faster than I would have believed possible. By the end of the first month, he had successfully bred his own new variety of carrot. The middle girl, Mira, started helping my mother with the cooking. She was small but determined. She refused to ever sit still. She was useful. The youngest, Lyra, mostly carried her doll around and named every new flower we grew. She had named about 70 plants by the second week. Our little family grew. Then it grew again. 2 weeks after the children came, a man arrived at the edge of our clearing. Alone, limping badly. He was old, maybe 70. He had a long gray beard. He carried a small wooden harp on his back. He had heard about the glowing forest from a song. The song was apparently being sung in taverns 3 kingdoms away. The song was about a place where the dead trees had come back to life again. The song was about hope. The old man wanted to see it before he died. He had walked here on a broken leg. He had not expected to find children. He certainly had not expected to find food or shelter, or a woman who told him to sit down and eat before he fell over. His name was Orin. He had been a court musician many years ago, before his kingdom fell, before he started wandering, before the world had run out of places for him. He stayed. Of course he stayed. He told the children stories at night by the fire, stories about old kingdoms, about brave knights and dragons. The smallest girl, Lyra, fell asleep every night listening to Orin. Her tiny hand would slip into his old wrinkled one. He never moved it. He just held her hand and kept telling the story softly until she was completely asleep. Then he would play his harp very quietly in the dark. I had never heard music like that before. Not in this world, not in my old one. The harp in his hands sounded like time itself slowing down. More people came. Slowly at first, a husband and wife who had been thrown off their land by a noble, a young woman fleeing an arranged marriage, 2 brothers who had been working in a mine that collapsed and killed everyone else. They had walked away with nothing. They came to us with nothing. We took them all in, every single one. The forest kept growing to make space. The vines built houses faster than people could ask for them. By the end of the second month in the Blackwood, our small settlement had 31 people in it, not counting my mother or me or the children. We had a village, a real village, with houses and gardens and a small well that I had grown from a vine that produced clean water year-round. We had crops growing year-round in the warmth that our magical plants generated. We had medicine, we had shelter, we had safety, we had each other. We did not have a name yet. The settlement, I mean. But nobody could agree on a name. The children wanted to call it Sunshine Cake. Lyra's suggestion. The old man Orin wanted to call it New Beginning. The young woman wanted to call it Freedom. The 2 brothers from the mine wanted to call it Home. I let them argue about it. My mother thought all the names were silly. She had her own name for it, which she said only once, very quietly to me. She called it Aldrich's Garden. I told her not to name it after me. She just smiled and went back to cooking. She called it that anyway, privately. But while our village grew, something else was happening, something I had been trying not to think about. The forest itself was changing now, not just growing, changing. The vines I had originally planted, the original 12 seeds, they were still here, underneath everything, connected. They had spread their roots through the entire healed section of the forest. They linked every tree, every plant, every flower, together. The forest was becoming one organism, one huge plant, with many shapes, many leaves, but one single shared root system underneath the soil. I noticed it first when I tried to move a small bush from one part of the village to another. The bush did not want to move. The bush had opinions. I tried to dig it up. The bush sent roots deeper. I tried to cut the roots. They had already linked themselves into the main network. Solid. I sat down next to the bush. I looked at it. I said, out loud, "Do you mind if I move you?" The bush rustled. The leaves all turned away from me. That was a no. I left the bush where it was. I started asking the forest before doing things. I started feeling the forest answer me back too. It answered in feelings, in nudges, in which direction the wind blew through the leaves. The forest had a personality now, a quiet, patient one. It was not really separate from me. I had bred it. I had grown it. My overgrowth skill was constantly active across the entire root network. But it was also not entirely me. It had its own preferences, its own opinions about things. It did not like cold. It did not like loud noises. It loved the children. The forest grew taller, faster, healthier, wherever the children played. Their laughter somehow was making it stronger. I did not understand the mechanism. I was a scientist. I needed mechanisms. But I could not find one for this. The forest, just like kids. I tried to explain it to Thomas, the oldest boy. He listened seriously. Then he said, maybe the forest was lonely, and now it has friends. A 10-year-old explained the science of magical forest biology to me in one sentence. I had no rebuttal. He was probably right. He usually was. By the third month, the forest covered 20 miles of the Blackwood. The healed section was visible from the sky now, a bright green patch, in the middle of 200 miles of dead gray trees. If anyone flew over it, they would see it immediately. We were not exactly hidden anymore. I knew this could not last forever. I knew the kingdom would eventually send someone to investigate. I knew that day was coming. I had no plan. So I started preparing. Quietly. I started teaching Thomas everything I knew. Real lessons, not just plant breeding, combat plants, defense plants. I bred thorned vines that could hold a man without injuring him. Trip vines that would tangle a horse. Sleep flowers that released pollen at night. I bred warning trees that would shake their leaves loudly when anything bigger than a deer entered the forest. A perimeter alarm system. Natural. The forest cooperated with all of it. The forest, I think, understood what was coming better than I did. It started growing defensive on its own. The outer ring of the healed area started growing thicker. The trees there grew closer together. The gaps between them got narrower, like a wall. One morning I walked out to the edge of our forest. The outer trees were now growing in a perfect circle around our village, spaced like teeth. You could squeeze a single person through them if you knew where to look. But a horse could not pass. A wagon could not pass. An army could not pass. The forest had built itself a fortress wall, without me telling it to, while I had been sleeping. It had decided we needed protection, so it provided. That night around our communal fire, I told everyone what I had seen. 31 adults, plus 3 children, plus my mother. All of them listened. Something is coming, I said. I don't know what, I don't know when, but the forest knows. And the forest is ready. We need to be ready too. The old man, Oren, nodded slowly. He had been a court musician once. He understood politics better than the rest of us. He spoke quietly, wisely. They will come from the south, he said. The kingdom will not let a glowing forest exist outside their control. Not for much longer. They cannot. And then they will send their best. He looked at me with his old, tired, knowing eyes. And their best, young man, will be very hard to stop. I nodded. I knew he was right. I had been preparing for it. But hearing it said out loud in front of the people I had grown to love was different. These were not strangers anymore. These were my people. My mother, 3 orphans, an old musician, a mining family. People who had nothing left. People who had walked here on broken legs and broken hearts. People who had finally found a place where they could just live. I was not going to let anyone take this from them. Not the Royal Mage Council, not the High Mage, not Inspector Varnon, not the king himself. The next morning I woke up before sunrise. I walked out to the edge of the forest, to the very oldest tree, the first one I had ever grown here. I put my hands on its bark. The tree was warm. The leaves above me shifted in a wind that was not blowing. The forest knew I was there, listening. I'm going to ask something of you, I said quietly, something I have never asked before. And I will not blame you if you cannot do it. I need you to grow faster than you ever have. I need you to become bigger, stronger, smarter, because the people who are coming are not kind. They will try to burn you. They will try to cut you down. They will try to poison your soil. I need you to be ready for all of it. I paused. And in return, I said, I will never leave you. I will protect you the same way you protect us. We are family now. The forest and us. All of it. The tree rustled. Not from wind. The bark under my hand grew warm. A vine reached up from the ground and gently wrapped around my wrist. Gently. I felt something then. A feeling. From the forest. It was not words. It was understanding. The forest had heard me. The forest agreed. Completely. That afternoon, the forest started growing again, but differently this time. Not outward, not spreading. Inward. Getting denser, getting older. Trees that had been 30 feet tall became 60 feet tall in 3 days. Roots went deeper. Branches grew wider. Leaves darkened, toughened. The vines themselves changed. They got thicker. Their thorns got longer. Their flowers changed color, from purple to a deep, almost black red. The forest was preparing for war. My polite, patient, child-loving forest was getting ready to fight. It made my chest hurt to watch the change. But it had to happen. Because 3 days after the forest started fortifying itself, a messenger bird arrived. A real one. Old style, with a scroll. I opened the scroll slowly. I read the message. My hand started shaking. My mother saw my face and came over immediately. What is it, Aldrich? I handed her the scroll. She read it. Then she sat down hard on the ground. She read it again. Then she looked at me with terrified eyes. It said only, "We are coming." It was signed by Inspector Varnon, and underneath the signature, there were small drops of dried red wax seal. The wax seal was not the Royal Mage Council seal. It was a different one, a seal I had only seen once before, in passing, on a tax collector's hat. It was the personal seal of the king himself. The Royal Mage Council had escalated this. They had gone all the way to the top of the kingdom. And the king had decided that one small, glowing forest with 35 people in it was now officially the kingdom's biggest single problem. Tell me honestly in the comments, would you fight a whole kingdom to protect 31 strangers and 3 orphans? Or would you run? Be honest. The royal army arrived at the edge of the Blackwood on a morning when the sky was the color of cold iron. There were 2,000 of them. Counted. I stood at the top of the tallest tree in my forest and watched them through a spyglass that Orin had brought with him from his old kingdom. 2,000 soldiers, plus 300 horses, plus 40 supply wagons, plus a row of strange metal cages I did not recognize from the front. Plus, in the very center of the army, a man on a white horse wearing a golden cloak. The king. The actual king had come to deal with me personally. The king had not left his palace in 12 years. Orin had told me that. The king ruling our kingdom did not travel. He sent others to die for him, but he had come here. For me. For a small forest with 35 people in it. That told me something I needed to understand very, very clearly. He was afraid of us. The most powerful man in the entire kingdom was personally afraid of a peasant farmer with a useless magic skill. Imagine that. I climbed back down the tree slowly. My hands were sweating. My heart was beating too fast. Below me, the forest watched the army assemble. I could feel the forest's mood through my connection to it. The forest was calm, patient, ready. It had spent the last week preparing for this. It had grown. It had hardened. It had built new structures I had not asked for. Things that looked like watchtowers. Things that looked like walls. The forest had been thinking, strategically. For the first time, it had started doing things on its own that I had not specifically requested. That terrified me a little, but it also gave me hope. Because whatever was about to happen, I was not facing 2,000 soldiers alone. I had help. I reached the ground. My mother was waiting for me at the base of the tree. Her face was pale. She had a kitchen knife tucked into her apron. A kitchen knife? Against an army. My mother was prepared to fight 2,000 soldiers with a kitchen knife. I almost laughed. I almost cried. "Mother," I said quietly, "I need you to take the children and Orin to the deep heart of the forest, the hollow tree. Stay there until I come for you." She shook her head immediately. "No, Aldrich, I'm not leaving you." I held her shoulders. "Mother, please. The children need someone they trust. Lyra is 6 years old. She needs her grandmother right now, not me. You are the only person in this forest she calls grandmother." She paused. She had not realized that. The smallest girl had been calling her grandmother for 3 weeks, quietly, when she thought nobody else heard her. My mother's eyes filled with tears. She wiped them away quickly. "All right," she whispered, "but you come back to me, Aldrich. You come back." I promised. I do not know if I meant it. I think I meant it, but I had no idea what was about to happen, so I do not know if I could keep it. She left to find the children. I walked toward the edge of the forest alone. The villagers stayed behind, hidden among the thicker trees, quiet, watching. Most of them held simple farming tools, pitchforks, scythes, axes. The 2 brothers from the mine carried their old digging picks instead. It was not an army that I had behind me. It was a group of frightened people armed with the wrong tools for the wrong fight. I had to protect them. I reached the edge of the forest. I stepped through the thick outer wall of trees. I walked out into the gray dead land between us and the army. I stopped about 100 feet beyond my forest's wall. I stood alone in the gray dirt. I was wearing simple clothes, no armor, no weapon, just me. The king's horse moved forward through the lines. The king himself rode out to meet me. He had 3 guards with him, heavily armored, silent. He stopped his horse about 30 feet from me. He looked down at me. He was younger than I had expected, maybe 45. Dark beard, tired eyes. "You are Aldrich," he said. It was not a question. I nodded. "Your Majesty." He studied me for a long moment. He looked older when he was studying. "You do not look like a threat," he said finally. "You look like a farmer." I shrugged. "I am a farmer, Your Majesty. That is all I have ever been." He smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Then why," he said, "is my entire Western Kingdom currently afraid to go outside after dark? Because of you." That surprised me. I had not heard that. I had been in the forest for 3 months. I had not received much news from the outside world recently. "Your Majesty," I said carefully, "I do not know what stories you have heard, but I have not left this forest in months. I have hurt no one. I have only grown crops and taken in refugees, people who had nowhere else to go." The king's smile got colder. "And that is exactly the problem." He gestured behind him, at his army, at his kingdom beyond it. Do you know how many peasants have run away from their lords this season? He asked. 12,000. They are leaving farms, leaving villages, leaving sworn duties. They are walking north, toward you, toward your glowing forest. I did not know that. I had no idea. We had only seen 31 refugees ourselves. I had not known we were the destination of so many other people. They believe, the king said quietly, that in your forest there is no hunger, no taxes, no nobles. They believe you are building a new kingdom. They are not entirely wrong, are they? I looked up at him. I thought carefully about my answer. Because the truth was, no, I was not entirely wrong. I had not meant to. I had only meant to grow food, to help my mother, to take in a few orphans. But the forest had its own ideas now, bigger ones. Your Majesty, I said, I never intended to challenge your rule. I am one man. I have a useless magic skill. I just wanted to grow things in peace. I never asked anyone to come here. I never recruited anyone. But when people arrive with nothing, I cannot turn them away. I'm not built that way. The king nodded slowly. He understood that. I could see it in his face. He understood the position I was in. He did not hate me for being in it. But he was still the king, and I had still become a problem for him. And one of us was going to have to make this end, quietly or otherwise. Aldrich, he said, I will offer you something. Once, only once. You will not get this offer again. So listen carefully to me, peasant. Listen. I listened. Come back with me to the capital. Join the royal court as the master of agriculture. I will give you a title, land, wealth, protection. Your forest will be officially licensed. Your people will be granted citizenship under royal protection. The orphans will be schooled at my expense. All I ask is that you submit your knowledge to the crown, that you teach my royal mages everything you know, that you serve me as one of mine. I stood there in the gray dirt. I thought about it for a long moment. I really did. It was not a bad offer. From his perspective, it was generous. He was offering me everything a peasant in this world could possibly dream of. Titles, land, wealth, security, royal protection for my entire family. He was offering me the chance to never be afraid again, to never have to defend my mother again, to never have to stand alone against an army again. And I would have to give him only one thing in return. My knowledge. All of it. Every crossbreeding technique. Every secret about overgrowth. He would take what I knew and weaponize it. He would breed forests like mine to attack his enemies. He would use my agricultural science as a war tool. The royal mages would replicate my work. They would use it to control more land, to break more kingdoms, to grow soldiers in fields like cabbages. I would become the most dangerous weapon ever created in this world. And the king would own that weapon, and the world would never recover from it. I looked up at him. He was a good king, as kings went. He was not cruel, he was not stupid. He was trying to solve a problem in the best way he knew, but he was also a king, and kings will always use the tools they are given. He would not be able to help himself. The weapon would be too useful. I took a slow breath. Your Majesty, I said quietly, I am very honored by your offer. Truly, it is a kinder offer than I expected to receive today, but I cannot accept it. I cannot give my knowledge to anyone, not to you, not to the Mage Council, not to any kingdom. The knowledge is too dangerous. It is not meant for one person's hands or one kingdom's army. It is meant to be shared with everyone, slowly, carefully, over generations. I paused. If I gave it to you, it would be turned into a weapon within 10 years. You would not mean for it to happen, but it would happen anyway. It always does. The king looked at me for a long, long time. The wind moved through the gray dead trees behind him. Nobody spoke. 2,000 men were silent. Finally, he nodded once. I respect your answer, he said quietly. I do not agree with it, but I respect it. He paused. And you understand the consequence? I nodded. I understand, Your Majesty. He looked at me one final time. It did not have to be this way, Aldrich. I want you to know that. I tried. I know, Your Majesty. So did I. He turned his horse around. He rode back to his army. The lines reformed, the army prepared to advance on us. I turned around and walked back to my forest. I passed through the thick outer wall of trees. I stood among my people. They were waiting for me. He offered me a title, I told them. He offered me everything, to give him my knowledge. Thomas, the boy, looked up at me. What did you say? I said no. The boy nodded slowly. He understood. He had always understood. He was 10 years old, and he understood more than most adults ever did. The two brothers from the mine raised their picks. The young woman raised her axe. The old musician Oren pulled out a small dagger I had not seen. Then we fight, Oren said quietly. All of us, to the last. I shook my head. No, you will not fight. Not today. I have something else in mind. I turned and faced the outer wall of my forest. I put both my hands on the bark of the nearest tree. I closed my eyes. I focused completely. I had been preparing for this moment for the last week. Quietly, I had been growing one specific thing, deeper than the rest of the forest could see, a 13th seed. I had crossbred something new, something my original 12 vines did not know about, something even my forest had not noticed. It was a different kind of plant. It did not eat manna, it did not produce food, it did not grow tall, it only did one thing. Very, very well, it made noise. Vibrations in the soil, songs that ran through root networks for miles in every single direction, plant sounds, underground music. The seed I had been growing for the last week was a communicator, a radio tower, made of living wood, buried 30 feet under the heart of my forest. I had been waiting for this exact moment to use it, because I knew now. 3 months in this forest had taught me. My forest was not the only one. The blackwood was huge, 200 miles of dead gray trees, but underneath the dead trees, the old roots were still there, sleeping, waiting. And not just the blackwood. Every forest in this world had once been alive. Most of them still were. They were connected. All of them. Underground, a vast network of sleeping roots, spanning continents, spanning oceans, older than every kingdom, older than every king, older than human memory. And nobody had been talking to them for thousands of years. The forests of this world had been alone, waiting for someone to remember they existed. I was going to remember them now. I pressed my hands against the bark. I activated overgrowth one more time. Just for the 13th seed, the radio, the seed woke up. It started singing, not in sound waves, in root vibrations, in something deeper, a signal, a message to every plant in the world. Wake up, wake up, wake up. I felt the message travel. It moved through my forest first, and then it crossed the gray dead zone of the blackwood. It hit the sleeping roots of the dead trees. Most of them were too far gone to wake, but some, the deeper ones, the older ones, they stirred slightly. The signal kept going. It crossed the blackwood entirely. It hit the southern forests, the ones the kingdom called normal, owned, cataloged, tame. Those forests were not really tame. They had been alive, just sleeping under heavy royal control, under heavy spells, forgotten by their own roots. The signal hit them and they remembered, slowly, then all at once. Across the entire kingdom and every forest that still had living trees in it, the trees woke up, just a little, just enough. The leaves stopped rustling normally. They started rustling toward the north, toward me, listening. I felt them, every single one. Millions of trees across the kingdom, suddenly aware, suddenly listening, suddenly ready for instructions from one place. It was so much, it was too much. The connection almost broke my mind in half. I felt my knees hit the dirt. I felt my mother's hands grab my shoulders. I felt the boy Thomas hold my hand. I felt the forest itself holding me up from underneath, through the roots, through the air, through everything. I opened my eyes. I was still kneeling. The army was advancing. The king had given the order. The first ranks of soldiers were marching toward us. I stood up slowly. I looked at the army. I raised my hand. Just one hand, just my right hand, palm flat, facing the army. A small, simple gesture. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. The army kept marching. The soldiers in front kept advancing. The king watched from his horse, confused, waiting. Then the ground started moving. Not under us, under them. Behind them, roots. Thick, old buried roots that had been sleeping for centuries. The roots erupted from the ground behind the army, across the entire battlefield. They came up not to hurt, just to stand, to exist, to be seen. The roots wrapped around the wheels of the supply wagons, gently, without breaking them. They wrapped around the horses' legs, held them in place. They wrapped around the soldiers' boots. They did not crush. They did not pierce. They simply held. The soldiers could not move forward or backward. The whole army froze in place, held by gentle wooden hands rising up from the soil. The king's horse stopped too. The king looked down, then up. He looked at me. I looked at him. We were 130 feet apart. We could not see each other's faces clearly, but we could see each other. I lowered my hand. The roots did not let go. They simply held. The forests, every forest in the kingdom was holding 2,000 soldiers in place. Around the king, the gray dead trees of the blackwood started turning green, slowly, from the deepest roots up. The forest was waking up itself. It had been dead for 200 years. It was waking up now, all of it, the whole 200 miles, returning to life in 10 minutes or less. The king watched it happen. His eyes went very, very wide. He understood now. He understood what I really was, what I had really done here. I had not built a forest. I had reminded every forest in the world that it was alive. I had given them back their voice, their connection, their will, and they were choosing, all of them, to refuse to be used as a battlefield today. They were choosing to hold the soldiers gently and wait it out. The king raised his hand. He shouted an order. His own royal mages, the ones who had been waiting in the back, came forward. They raised their staffs. They tried to use fire. The flames came out of their staffs and traveled 3 feet before dying in midair. The mana in the air had been absorbed. The mages tried lightning, wind, ice, every spell they knew. Every spell drained the moment it left the staff. The plants ate everything, midair. The royal mages, all of them, ran out of mana within about 90 seconds. Then they collapsed. Some of them just sat down. They could not fight. The army was helpless. The mages were spent. The horses were held in place. The wagons were rooted to the ground. The king was completely alone. He looked at his army. He looked at me. He looked at his now green blackwood behind him. He looked at the sky. He took a long, deep, slow breath. Then he did something I did not expect. He got off his horse. He walked across the gray dirt toward me, slowly, carefully. He left his guards behind. His guards were also held by roots. They could not follow him. He walked 130 feet to where I stood, completely alone, unarmed. He stopped 6 feet from me. He looked into my eyes. He looked tired. So tired. The kind of tired that comes from a lifetime of being a king. "You win," he said quietly. I shook my head. "No, Your Majesty, I do not want to win. I just want this to stop." He nodded. He understood me again. "What do you want, then?" he asked. I thought about my answer for a long time. The wind moved through the now living blackwood behind him, whispering. "I want a treaty," I said. "I want my forest to be recognized as its own sovereign land, not under your rule, not under any rule, independent. I want safe passage for any refugee who wishes to come to my forest. No more arrests, no more pursuit, no more punishment for the families they leave. I want the Royal Mage Council to stop persecuting peasants who have unusual abilities. I want the awakening ceremony reformed, better, fairer. And I want you to leave today with your army peacefully and never come back with weapons. You are welcome in my forest, always, but not with weapons." The king looked at me for a long time. He was thinking, considering. He was a smart king. He was weighing what he had just seen against everything he knew. "That is a lot to ask," he said finally. "It is," I said. "But you have just watched every forest in your kingdom wake up at once, so you know I can ask it." He nodded slowly. He smiled. A real smile this time. Tired, but real. "You are a strange peasant, Aldrich. A very strange peasant." He held out his hand. "I accept your terms. All of them. Drafted properly with my scribes within the month. You will have your independent forest, Master of Agriculture. And in return, you will not extend your forest's reach beyond the Blackwood without my permission. Agreed?" I shook his hand firmly. "Agreed." The roots relaxed. The army was released. The soldiers stumbled backward. Some of them sat down. They had been terrified. They had been ready to die. Instead, they were going home. They were going to tell stories that their grandchildren would not believe, about the day the forests woke up. The king returned to his horse. He rode back to his army. He gave orders. The army turned around. They began the long march south, back home, peacefully. I stood there in the gray dirt of the Blackwood, which was no longer gray, and I watched 2,000 soldiers walk away from me without a fight. My mother came running out through the forest wall. She grabbed me. She squeezed me so tight my ribs hurt again. She was crying, really crying. The children came after her. Lyra grabbed my left leg. Mira grabbed my right leg. Thomas just stood there beside me, looking up at me. Quiet, proud. Orrin came out next, slowly, leaning on his harp. He looked at the retreating army. He looked at the now green forest of the Blackwood. He smiled. "Young man," he said softly, "I have lived 73 years, and I have never seen a king walk away from a fight he started. Never once. Today, I have seen it. Today I have seen the world change a little bit. Just a little." He paused. "Thank you for letting me be here to see it." I had no answer for that. I just nodded. I held my mother. I picked up Lyra. I let Mira and Thomas lean against me. I watched the army disappear. 2 weeks later, the king's official scribes arrived with the signed treaty. They brought it personally. They were polite. They drank our tea. The treaty was signed, sealed with both the king's seal and a new seal, which I had to invent on the spot. I made it the simple shape of a leaf. The treaty held. Refugees kept coming. We grew. By the end of the first year, our settlement was 200 people. By the second year, 600. By the third year, the Blackwood was completely alive again. Every tree, every plant, 200 miles of forest, restored from death to abundance. Thomas grew up. He became my apprentice, then my partner. He started his own crossbreeding experiments. He invented things I had not thought of. He bred a plant that produced clean drinking water. He bred a tree that grew houses inside its trunk. He bred flowers that sang when the wind blew. Lyra grew tall and quiet and strange. She started talking to the trees in a way that even I could not. She heard them. She became the forest's voice. Oren lived another 6 years with us. He died peacefully one autumn evening, his harp on his lap, Lyra sitting beside him, holding his hand. Quiet. We buried him under the oldest tree in the forest, the first tree I had ever grown here. The tree grew an extra branch over his grave that night. The branch looked like a small harp. We never planted that branch. The forest grew it on its own, as a memorial, for a man who had once told stories. I lived in that forest for the rest of my second life. 46 more years. I never went back to the capital. I never left the Blackwood again. I outlived 3 kings. The first one, the one who had signed the treaty, died of old age. He kept his word until the very end. He was a good king. I taught for the rest of my life. I trained 83 apprentices in the principles of agricultural science. They went on to teach others. The knowledge spread, slowly, carefully, across generations, the way I had wanted it to spread, not as a weapon, as a tool, as a way to grow food. By the time I died, an old man under the same tree where Oren was buried, the kingdom had changed completely. The peasants were not starving anymore. Crops grew everywhere. Crossbreeding was practiced openly. Famine had become rare. The Royal Mage Council had been reformed. The world was better. The last thing I felt was Thomas's hand holding mine. He was an old man himself by then, 64 years old, with white hair, with my green eyes. Not really my eyes, but the eyes I had given him, the way of looking at things, the way of seeing problems and solutions instead of curses and gods. "Goodbye, Aldrich," he said softly. The forest was very quiet around us. Even the wind had stopped. The trees were listening. They were saying goodbye. I closed my eyes. I felt my mother somewhere, even though she had been gone for 30 years. I felt Oren somewhere, his old harp playing softly. I felt all the people I had loved in this second life, all the children who had become adults, all the strangers who had become family, all of them. And I felt the forest itself, my polite, patient, child-loving, world-changing forest. It was saying thank you in its quiet, root-deep way. I had died holding a soil sample in my first life. I died holding my apprentice's hand in my second life. Both deaths in their own way were good ones. But this one was better. This one had meaning. This one was earned. This one was the death of someone who had built something real here. And somewhere, in the deep underground network of roots that I had reawakened on a gray morning a lifetime ago, a small new shoot pushed up. A young plant, pushing up through the soil for the first time. Just a green seedling, the next generation, the continuation, beginning again. The story does not end with me. The story keeps going. The forest keeps growing. The people keep coming. The knowledge keeps spreading. Forever. That is how it should be. That is how all the best stories should end. Not with a victory, not with a sword, but with a small green plant growing. If this story made you feel something, drop a comment and tell me what hit hardest. And if you made it this far, you are officially part of the forest now.